How does a land of rice, paddies, become a graveyard? Where people eat tree bark, roots, and even clay to survive, while warehouses full of grain sit guarded just miles away. In the winter of early 1945, northern Vietnam's Red River Delta, a mother named Lan carried her youngest child through the streets of Tay Bien H province. The child, barely 2 years old, had stopped crying days earlier, too weak from hunger. Bodies lay along roadsides, swollen from edema, skin stretched tight over bones, eyes sunken. Some villagers, driven to desperation, boiled banana leaves or chewed sawdust mixed with water. Others wandered aimlessly, searching for anything edible. Lan had sold her last possession, a silver bracelet, for a handful of rice at inflated prices, but even that was gone. She reached a guarded warehouse where Japanese soldiers and local officials stored requisitioned grain. "Please," she whispered in Vietnamese, "just a little for my baby." A guard pushed her away with a rifle butt. Inside, sacks of rice waited for export or military use. By March 1945, the famine peaked. Thousands died daily in Tonkin alone. Corpses were collected in carts at dawn, too many to bury properly. Families abandoned the weakest to save the rest. Children with distended bellies begged at doorways that no longer opened. The air carried the smell of decay and smoke from cooking pots that held nothing but weeds. Yet farther south, in the Mekong Delta, rice harvests remained abundant, if only transport had not been crippled by Allied bombings and wartime restrictions. The contrast was cruel. Plenty existed, but policies and chaos ensured it never reached the starving north. In those months, an estimated 1 million people perished, perhaps more, in what became known as the famine of the ICTU. Survivors later recalled mothers hiding food from their own children to prolong life a little longer, neighbors turning away from pleas, and the slow, silent march of skeletal figures toward rivers or fields in search of anything green. One elderly survivor described it simply: "We ate everything that grew, and when nothing grew, we ate nothing." The famine was not a sudden disaster, but the culmination of years of extraction, compounded by wars, disruptions. In the face of such suffering, small acts of humanity persisted, neighbors sharing a single sweet potato, families pooling scraps, but they could not stem the tide. The question haunts: how can abundance coexist with mass death in the same country? In northern Vietnam, during those dark months of 1945, the answer lay in policies that prioritized military needs over human lives, in disrupted supply lines, in forced requisitions that left farmers with nothing after harvest. The land that once fed millions became a place where survival demanded the impossible. The Vietnamese famine of 1944-1945 holds profound historical importance as one of the deadliest episodes of civilian suffering during World War II in Asia, with mortality estimates ranging from 400,000 to 2 million, most scholarly sources settling around 1 million in northern Vietnam over a few months. It occurred in French Indochina, specifically Tonkin, northern Vietnam, and parts of Annam Central, under dual Japanese military occupation and Vichy French colonial administration. The famine accelerated the collapse of colonial authority, eroded public support for both French and Japanese rule, and significantly boosted the Viet Minh's recruitment and legitimacy, paving the way for the August Revolution in 1945 that led to Vietnam's declaration of independence. Vietnam had been under French colonial rule since the late 19th century, with the economy reoriented toward export crops and resource extraction. The Red River Delta in the north was densely populated and rice-dependent, while the Mekong Delta in the south produced large surpluses. Pre-war policies already strained northern peasants through taxation, land concentration, and forced labor. When World War II began, France fell to Germany in 1940. The Vichy regime retained nominal control of Indochina, but allowed Japanese troops to enter in September 1940. Japan used Indochina as a strategic base and economic resource hub for its greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. From 1940 onward, Japan demanded increasing rice deliveries up to 1 million tons annually under rice accords. For its military and home front, French authorities enforced requisitions at fixed low prices, for example, far below market rates that soared 260 to 70 piastres by 1945. Farmers in Tonkin, already on the edge of subsistence, had to sell most of their harvest, leaving little for personal consumption or seed. Additional pressures included converting rice fields to jute for gunny sacks and other industrial crops to meet Japanese needs. Both Japanese and French troops seized food directly for their garrisons. Natural disasters exacerbated the crisis. Droughts and insects reduced 1944 spring harvests. Severe typhoons and floods in August-September 1944 destroyed autumn crops in coastal Tonkin. Dike maintenance failed due to labor shortages and U.S. bombing of northern infrastructure, targeting transport to disrupt Japanese supply lines. Allied air attacks on roads, railways, and shipping made moving rice from surplus southern areas to the deficit north nearly impossible. Corruption in the Vichy administration and hoarding worsened distribution. By late 1944, rice prices exploded. Peasants could not repurchase food. The peak mortality came in March-May 1945, with bodies lining roads and villages emptying. The Japanese coup on March 9th ousted Vichy French rule and installed a puppet empire Vietnam government under Trần Trung Kim. But relief efforts were inadequate amid ongoing requisitions and chaos. The famines scale potentially 10% of the affected population in months, highlighted wartime exploitation's human cost and contributed to revolutionary momentum. As the Viet Minh organized rice seizures from warehouses and relief efforts, gaining widespread peasant support, this event underscores how wartime policies, combined with natural shocks and disrupted logistics, can transform chronic vulnerability into catastrophe. It remains a stark record of civilian suffering in occupied territories, where food became a strategic weapon and ordinary people bore the consequences. The crisis deepened gradually through 1944. In the spring, after a poor harvest due to drought and insect damage, Japanese authorities, through Vichy French officials, increased rice requisitions in Tonkin. Farmers in provinces like Tai Bien Nach, Nam Han, and Haidijiang were ordered to deliver fixed quotas at prices far below market value. Village headmen, under pressure, enforced collections with local militia. By summer, many households had nothing left after handover. Seed rice for the next planting was often taken due. In August and September 1944, typhoons struck the northern coast. Floods swept through the Red River Delta, destroying ripening autumn rice crops. Dikes, poorly maintained due to forced labor shortages, broke in places. Waterlogged fields turned to mud. Plants rotted. At the same time, Japanese orders expanded jute cultivation, replacing rice paddies with fiber crops for sandbags and gunny sacks. In some districts, up to 20 to 30% of land shifted away from food production. Farmers protested quietly, but had no choice. Refusal meant beatings or arrest. Transport collapsed under Allied bombing. U.S. aircraft from China targeted railways, bridges, and coastal shipping to disrupt Japanese supply lines. The Hanoi-Saigon rail line was cut repeatedly. Barges on the Red River were sunk or grounded. Rice from the Mekong Delta, where harvests remained good, could not reach the north in meaningful quantities. Prices in Hanoi soared from 1 to piastres per DSKG in early 1944 to 60 to 70 piastres by early 1945. Most peasants could not afford to buy back what they had grown. By November 1944, the first signs of mass hunger appeared. In rural villages, people ate sweet potato leaves, banana blossoms, and wild herbs. Children stopped growing. Adults lost strength for fear. In December, edema set in, legs swelled, faces puffed, skin split. Bodies weakened. Diseases like beriberi and dysentery spread in crowded huts. One survivor later recalled, "We cooked the bark of banana trees, ground it into paste, mixed it with a little rice bran if we had any." January 1945 brought the peak. Daily deaths rose to thousands in Tonkin. In cities like Hanoi, corpses appeared on sidewalks. Collection carts rolled at dawn, stacking bodies for mass burial in shallow pits outside town. In villages, families buried their dead in backyard gardens or abandoned fields. Some, too weak to dig, left bodies by roadsides. Desperation drove acts of survival. People stole from neighbors' fields at night, fought over scraps in markets, or sold children to wealthier households for a few kilograms of rice. Reports documented isolated cases of cannibalism, parents eating deceased infants or bodies found partially consumed, though these remained rare and were suppressed in official accounts. Twists emerged in small, cruel forms. In February 1945, some warehouses held rice, requisitioned but not yet shipped, guarded by Japanese soldiers or local police. Villagers gathered outside, begging or attempting to rush the gates. Guards fired warning shots or used bayonets to disperse crowds. In one documented incident near Taibien, a group of women broke through a fence at night. Soldiers opened fire, killing several. The rice stayed locked away for military use or export. Heroics appeared in quiet resistance. Viet Minh cadres, operating underground, organized secret rice distributions from hidden stocks or raided small warehouses. When possible, they encouraged peasants to hide grain or refuse quotas where they could. In some villages, Buddhist monks shared temple food reserves or soup kitchens fed the weakest. Ordinary people shared what little they had. A neighbor giving half a sweet potato to a starving family. A fisherman trading dried fish for rice bran. These acts saved lives, but could not reverse the scale of loss. Losses mounted relentlessly. Entire families vanished. Villages emptied as survivors fled south or to cities. Children became orphans overnight, wandering roads in search of food. Women miscarried from malnutrition. The birth rate plummeted. By March-April 1945, daily mortality in affected provinces reached 3,000 to 5,000 bodies. Decomposed in heat, flies swarmed. Cholera outbreaks followed. Poor sanitation. Technology and weapons appeared in enforcement. Japanese troops used Arisaka rifles and Type 99 light machine guns to guard collection points and suppress unrest. French colonial police carried MAS-36 rifles, but trucks, often Japanese Isuzu, or captured French vehicles, transported rice to ports or warehouses under armed escort. No advanced weapons were needed. Hunger itself became the weapon, enforced by bayonets and paperwork. In March 1945, the Japanese coup d'etat removed Vichy French administration. The new puppet government, under Emperor Boji and Prime Minister Chen Chong-kim, attempted limited relief, opening some warehouses, importing small amounts from the south. But requisitions continued for Japanese forces. Transport remained broken. Allied bombings intensified after the coup. In March-May 1945, mortality peaked as remaining reserves vanished. In Hanoi, streets filled with skeletal figures, crawling to markets or collapsing in doorways. In rural areas, fields lay untended. The spring planting failed in many places due to lack of seed and labor. People ate clay mixed with water to fill stomachs, leading to intestinal blockages and death. One report described mothers tying cloths around infants' mouths to muffle cries they could no longer feed. In late March, the Viet Minh launched coordinated actions. Cadres lead groups to seize rice from Japanese and government warehouses in several provinces. In Thanh Nguyen, NAMB, Sejong armed teams overran guarded depots, distributing sacks to starving villages. These raids, small but symbolic, provided immediate relief and demonstrated that authority could be challenged. Word spread quickly. More peasants joined or supported the movement. By April, Allied advances in the Pacific and Burma cut Japanese supply lines further. Rice exports to Japan dropped sharply, but northern stocks remained inaccessible. The Tan Trung Kim government declared emergency measures, price controls, forced sales from hoarders, but corruption and chaos limited effectiveness. Some officials pocketed relief funds. Others fled. The turning point came not from policy, but from the famine's own momentum and external events. As deaths continued into May, the surviving population weakened further. Then, in early August 1945, Japan's surrender after atomic bombings shifted everything. The Viet Minh seized the moment. On August 13th to 19th, the August Revolution swept the country. In Hanoi and northern provinces, crowds stormed remaining warehouses. Rice flowed into villages. For the first time in months, the Viet Minh declared independence on September 2nd, 1945, with H.T. Minh citing the famine as evidence of colonial and occupation failures. Resolution was partial and uneven. Relief arrived slowly. International aid UNRWA shipments began in late 1945, but many died waiting. The famine's end coincided with political upheaval rather than deliberate victory over hunger. No single force won. The catastrophe ended because the war ended and power changed hands. The Viet Minh gained legitimacy by acting when others did not, seizing rice, organizing aid, promising land reform. The lesson carved deepest was the fragility of life under extraction. When food becomes a strategic commodity, requisitioned, exported, hoarded, ordinary people pay the price. Policies prioritizing military needs over civilian survival turned abundance into scarcity. Natural disasters amplified man-made shortages, but human decisions, fixed quotas, field conversions, transport neglect drove the death toll. It showed how hunger erodes society. Families fracture, morality bends, trust vanishes, yet resilience persisted. Hidden grain, shared scraps, quiet defiance. The famine did not break the Vietnamese spirit. It fueled demands for change. Survivors carried lifelong scars, stunted growth, lost relatives, memories of bodies and streets. The event became part of collective memory, a reminder that food security is never guaranteed when war and occupation control the harvest. In the end, the North did not win against starvation. It endured until the system collapsed. The rice that once filled warehouses finally reached those who grew it, but only after 1 million lives were lost. The fields were replanted, villages rebuilt, but the silence of those empty months echoed long after. The Vietnamese famine of 1944 to 1945 left deep scars across the North. Survivors returned to empty villages, untended fields, and families reduced to fragments. Many who lived carried lifelong consequences. Stunted growth in children who survived, chronic illnesses from prolonged malnutrition, memories of neighbors and kin who wasted away before their eyes. Widows raised children alone. Orphans wandered into cities or joined resistance groups. The land recovered slowly. The 1945 harvest improved with better weather and fewer requisitions after Japan's surrender. But the human cost could not be undone. In the months that followed, the August Revolution swept through Vietnam. DB8 means strengthened by their actions. During the famine, rice, underground relief, promises of justice took control in Hanoi. On August 19th, Truman's Declaration of Independence on September 2nd cited colonial exploitation and wartime suffering, including the famine, as reasons the people could no longer accept foreign rule. The tragedy became a rallying point. proof that neither French colonialism nor Japanese occupation had valued Vietnamese lives. Decades later, the famine remains etched in collective memory as N-O-E-Et-D, the famine of the E-D-E. Memorials stand in affected provinces. Annual commemorations recall the dead. Historians continue to debate exact numbers, causes, and responsibilities, but the scale of suffering is undisputed. It stands as one of the starkest examples of how wartime policies, forced exports, field conversions, transport destruction can turn a rice-producing country into a place of mass starvation. The event taught a brutal lesson. Food is power. When control over grain becomes a tool of strategy or profit, civilians become expendable. Natural disasters can worsen hunger, but human decisions determine who eats and who does not. In northern Vietnam, those months, abundance existed elsewhere, yet policies and chaos ensured it stayed out of reach. Small acts of sharing, defiance, and survival kept hope alive, but they could not prevent the catastrophe. The fields were replanted, villages rebuilt, children born anew. Yet the silence of those empty months, the sound of carts collecting bodies at dawn, the sight of swollen faces and hollow eyes, lingers as a reminder of what happens when survival is denied to millions. I've just said what's recorded in history. You should find out the real truth yourself. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video, and we have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. Like this video, if these stories of human endurance through unimaginable hardship touch you, comment below what lessons from the 1945 famine still matter today. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more forgotten WW2 stories that history sometimes overlooks. See you in the next one.